Hey, what's up? Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of SimplyPodLogical, a Simply Now Logical podcast. Yeah?
Why do you have accents?
I don't know.
When did that start? Keep going.
I'm simply, yeah.
Are you making fun of me?
Yeah, this is my Cristine. Yeah.
Shut up.
Cristine, we just watched a documentary called Bad Vegan about a vegan woman who eats a pizza.
That's not what it was about, but that is the media's oversimplified take, I think,
okay.
and what makes viewers want to click.
Well, tell me, give me the 2-minute pitch. Summarize a movie to me, Cristine.
Okay, so
tell me about Bad Vegan.
Anyways, that's what we're discussing on today's podcast. Contrary to popular beliefs after last week's podcast that I don't consume any content, we did watch this recent Netflix documentary that's getting a bit of buzz, I guess, but it's actually not a new story. It's from 2016 is when this was first news, but it's called Bad Vegan and it's out on Netflix right now. Not sponsored, but that's just where you can get it. And I think like they want you to think it's about a vegan who ultimately, committed some crimes and then later was called out for her crimes and exposed because she was caught ordering at a Domino's pizza, which presumably does not offer vegan options. So that's kind of the hook. And that is what the media did pick up on at the time in 2016. This is a real story. It's a real person. It's a real case. But the documentary, which is a 4-part series, basically tells the story of Sarma, who was once
this woman. Her name is
a woman.
Sarma.
Her name is Sarma.
It's a weird name, isn't it?
Sarma.
Yeah.
It's interesting. But she
Unusual
was
name,
at one point like an econ major. She appeared to be this intelligent, bright woman. She went to Wharton's cooking school. Wharton? I don't know. But it's like some esteemed school for cooking in New York. And she started a restaurant that was like a boutique restaurant that got a really good reputation to the point that like celebrities like Alec Baldwin were going and some other people. It's called Pure Food. Fuck, I can't remember now.
Okay, basically, yeah. She opened a bunch of raw vegan restaurants.
Yeah.
And that was when that was a lot less common. This was like in 2004, I want to say.
A long time ago.
So I think you can find those all over LA now these days. But I think at the time it was pretty cutting edge, let's say. And yeah, a lot of celebrities, Woody Harrelson, Owen Wilson, Anne Hathaway would, I guess, frequent this restaurant. Alec Baldwin, who's kind of involved in the story.
So she was the owner of that, and it was all her ideas, her vegan recipes and stuff, and she ran a good staff at the time, and eventually was on like some book covers and did some magazine spots where she would, like people started to see her as somewhat of a public figure.
She became like a celebrity. Yeah. Well, she wasn't the chef though. She wasn't.
She was.
I don't really know. Business school. Is that what you mean?
Yeah, but she had a passion for vegan food.
Sure, but but like her boyfriend was the head chef there when they first opened it until he left the business, I think.
Right, so
they released a book together, like the two of them was on the cover. It's kind of a famous vegan cookbook, I think.
Right. Okay. But the beginning of the documentary was basically just presenting her as a, successful, very personable person that everyone loved. Like she was easy to get along with. Employees loved working with her. They called her Sarma Mama because she was like their mom. It was meant to look like a warm restaurant environment from a relationship perspective.
One of the first things they show you in the documentary is like a clip of Howard Stern describing her as like the hot blonde woman who runs a vegan restaurant. And honestly, that kind of was like the media trope that she was this attractive blonde woman who ran this very vegan, healthy restaurant.
So then, later, a few years later, there's someone who starts up in her life who is like a mystery to all of her friends, family, and her close employees. This guy who went by Shane, who later went by a few other names, but he ultimately convinces her over the course of a few years to give him money and that he's going to hold on to that money or shelve it and give it back to her later, but more. And she will be able to repay all her debts. She had a lot of restaurant debt, which, I guess isn't uncommon.
This is important context, though. Like, even though she was, like, on the covers of magazines and sort of celebrated as this vegan food icon, She wasn't rich. And that's something to keep in mind. Like, there's a lot of famous people who, just because someone is famous doesn't mean they're rich. So, yeah, she had a lot of debts and owed money to a lot of investors who had helped her open the restaurant. Yeah. So she's seeing this guy. Do you want me to go? And yeah, he convinced, the story he gives her is that he is some like secret agent for the US military, Black Ops,
Yeah.
which isn't something you can like validate or confirm or necessarily even exists, right? So like she would say, like, I walked into his room and he's looking at drone footage on his computer. He probably just pulled up a fucking YouTube video or
YouTube.
something. Yeah. So, and he, the documentary series portrays this in an interesting way, but like she had some like tech contact of his that was like supposedly another person that had gained access to all her accounts and was like sort of her between her and this guy while he was out on his secret missions around the world. Turns out it was just him using another email, by the way. But so he's convinced her. The scam is kind of hard to explain because at first it just seems like he promised her he has a lot of money that he will eventually give her, but he's sort of testing her by saying, you need to be willing to do anything I say now, which is basically just like, give me money. But it goes beyond, he's not just promising her riches. As you dig into the story, he's promised her that he can make her and her dog immortal, was one of the main things he was pitching her. And he seemed to have convinced her that he was part of some like secret society or something that had unlocked some sort of mystical or magical secrets of how to make people live longer or could deliver to people any sort of riches or anything they want.
And he kind of talked in hypotheticals. He'd refer to these people as them or they or
The family.
the family, but it wasn't actually like a tangible family that existed. He would just say like, you're going to disappoint the family, or that they were destined for a higher plane, and say things like that. Or now we're going into the box, which is basically just any room where he could argue that external forces weren't listening. And
when he was getting
some
her
cosmic
to
stuff.
and
Yeah.
so he'd send her on these like tasks, which mostly just involved her borrowing or finding money to give him. But these were framed as if they were cosmic tests for her to prove her commitment to their plan. And then one day, sweetie, don't worry, I'm going to give you
Yeah.
all the money and everything you need. In like a super, like, we'll get into this, but it's really hard to believe how anyone actually falls for this. And I think there is reasonable debate. I think there's a really big question mark as to whether she was a participant or sort of a victim of his emotional manipulation or abuse or whatever you want to call it.
And we'll talk about that. And just because I feel like this is such a hard story to tell, I do encourage you, if you want to know the ins and outs and whether or not you agree with our opinion, like, you got to watch the documentary, and honestly, like, read about the case too, to see what other examples there are of things that he would tell her and then would turn out to not be true, or how she interpreted things. She did write a blog post actually recently about this too. So it's interesting to read from all angles. We're not doing a good job like explaining everything that happened. There's just a lot of shit that happened, to be honest.
So because she keeps giving him all her money for them to go on trips and for him mostly to gamble, we'll get into that, she can't afford to pay her staff or keep the restaurant open. So the restaurant, the employees of the restaurant have a walkout, and that sort of brings some attention to the fact that she's not paying people. And then all the investors who gave her hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars realize at one point, she just sort of skips town with this guy. So they're fugitives. They're literally on the run. Because of the amount of money, it's a felony. And I guess a lot of the headlines, they got caught because they ordered a Domino's pizza to the hotel they were staying at. And the local authorities tracked them down because they ordered the pizza under his actual name,
yeah.
right? But yeah, we opened this with a bit of a joke, but yeah, a lot of the headlines and the media hook was vegan restaurateur who stopped paying her staff and repaying investors got caught ordering a pizza, non-vegan pizza.
Yeah.
And it's like, who gives a shit about the pizza? This is a story about like promises of eternal life and hundreds of thousands of dollars being defrauded from people. Like it's such like an inconsequential part of the story that it's just kind of stupid.
Yeah, it is, but that's what kind of makes the hook for people to click. So like I see why they did that, but yeah, that's not what's interesting to me about the story. I don't care.
I was more interested. I wanted to hear more. What kind of menu? What's a raw vegan menu look like, Christine? Like we have vegan restaurants here,
Yeah.
like that we like. But like I don't necessarily even think of them as all that
why
healthy.
don't you ask
Because
her?
things are
She's
like
on
fried. I'll ask
She's
Sarma.
on Twitter. She's active.
Yeah, but so I guess the thinking is that as soon as you heat certain fruits and vegetables, their nutritional and like vitamin content can actually be reduced just by heating it up, right? So I guess it's the healthiest way of consuming fruits and vegetables is if they're raw. I think that's the idea. But like, what is a menu? What's an example of a raw vegan dish that's actually like edible?
I don't know.
You don't know this?
I don't.
You eat salads.
Yeah, and I'll eat anything that's put into
You'll eat
a
anything.
salad that's raw. I swear I don't understand your question. Like, no,
Could you imagine only eating raw food, I guess is my question. I would have liked to know more about
I
the
like
business of the
cooking
restaurant,
stuff.
I think is my
Okay,
point.
well that clearly wasn't really the point of the story.
No?
Ben. No. But maybe let's talk about how this even happened, because I think the popular response, especially like if you go on Twitter and you look at hashtag bad vegan, like the common denominator response is, what a dumb woman. How could this happen? So stupid. I can't believe it. And the same response happened from shows like the Tinder Swindler. Like, how could these women believe him? It was clearly bullshit. So I do want to unpack that a little bit. And while I can see that that is the baseline reaction that most people would have, I think it's always more complicated than that, and it's worth listening to the person to understand how this even happened. But like from your understanding of watching the documentary, and obviously it's subjective because we don't have her entire mind present with us.
I don't think you can even consider her a reliable
Source, yeah.
interview in this documentary.
Is she a reliable narrator?
Yeah, I think I read an interview with the people who made the doc after, and the conclusion that the producer or the director, I can't remember which one it was, said like, he's like, we're pretty certain that she wouldn't have done this without his influence. Mm-hmm. Like it's hard to believe she would have done all these things and defrauded her investors and not paid her staff and everything if this guy doesn't come into her life. But I personally find it incredibly difficult to believe that she wasn't aware of the sort of fraud going on. Like I guess it's tough, right? Because condensed into like a 4-hour series, you're seeing the highlights of all the crazy things he's promising her, like secret societies and eternal life for her dog. You don't see like the 4 years of gaslighting and manipulation of how maybe someone really, I don't think this could happen to everyone, but I think some people can be manipulated more easily than others. And it seems like the most flattering interpretation of what happened here is that she was an easy to manipulate target by this terrible guy. I'm not sure I'm willing to go there. I think on some level she knew what was going on here.
I mean, I think both can exist at the same time. And that's what's frustrating about like the Twitter response is people are either she is this or she is that. And I do think, at least from what I've observed, which obviously isn't the entire truth, and no one will have the entire truth except the people involved. But she did seem, the documentary was painting her to be as somewhat as an impressionable person. Like she was previously influenced by her boyfriend at the time about the decision she made. She didn't even like want to get into food at the beginning. She was an econ major and then ultimately switched because her boyfriend's like, let's do this. The documentary made a point to point out those things about her early life. Now, whether or not that should have weight here, I don't know. But she did herself say in the series.
I don't think you got that. She was working in finance and someone said, do you even like finance? And she's like, no. And they're like, it seems like you like food. And then all of a sudden it's like she has a career in food.
Did I mix that up?
I don't think her boyfriend.
But I guess I'm just trying to, I remember them saying that she was easy to flip or switch what it was she was interested based on who she was around.
It seemed like she was a pretty malleable person.
Right. And that's like normal and fine when you're young. So I guess it's hard to say, like obviously people change their minds. But then later on, when she did get this new boyfriend who turned out to be someone that she married, which was like a part of the mystery. This was the guy who.
So it's not really. It was never clear to me that they really had a romantic relationship in any way.
It seemed in the beginning they did.
Like it seems like they got married because he was saying he has a bunch of money to give her, and an accountant told her she could get it from him without tax consequences if they were married. That is sort of the narrative they gave as to why they got married. Like I don't know. You're right. It seems like they were dating early on, and all her friends and family like were confused about it because it just seems strange. Do you know what I mean? Like she never spoke about him in a way that expressed any sort of like intimacy or.
She seemed to keep him secret from the people in her life, like her family and her close friend employees. So they're like she had told them. She didn't tell them when they got married. She didn't really want to introduce or say much about her boyfriend before they were married. And then kind of like hid her ring at one point or disguised it and appeared to seem like almost ashamed when she had to explain to one of her coworkers that they did get married. So all of that is not something you would normally have a reaction to. But just going back to what I was trying to say, but just doing a bad job of, was like, I get the impression just by watching her that she is someone who is more impressionable. And like, I'm not saying that that's a bad thing, but there are people who are more like sponges in life who absorb the ideas of others around them and are more easily to like vulnerable to go down a rabbit hole that might be a bad one. And you may not know that at the time, but there are some people who are just more agreeable than others. That's literally like a score on a psychology test, is agreeableness. And I think that she's appears, based on everything we've seen, to be high on that. So with that in mind, observing how far you can go and what happened to her is a little easier, or like I think it's a fair treatment of her to acknowledge that up front, especially given that she seemed to have such high hopes for like another life with more meaning. She seemed to be missing something in her current reality and would often kind of talk about how there must be something more to a higher plane than she was experiencing. And this guy was telling her that higher plane existed and that there was a way to get there, but she just had to trust him. So if you're in her like agreeable personality position, it's easier to understand how you go along with that because you think you're going to find that thing you're looking for.
So I think that is the right take. It's not just that she's a dumb woman that's oversimplifying it, but there were times while she's giving interviews to the filmmaker where they're asking her about like her really playing along in the fraud being committed by her husband. And she seems to be describing it as if it like that completely absolves her of any sort of agency or complicity in it. And I just thought it was way too convenient the way she described things. Like at one point they got one of her original investors back at the table, and I think he was conceiving of some way to rip that guy off again or something. It wasn't totally clear what they wanted with him. But like she was willing to help facilitate that meeting, and she had meetings with the guy, and she lied about who this other mysterious guy was, whether it was her husband or just like another investor. Like it seemed like she was a pretty active participant in what they were doing at some times.
And the producer at some point challenged her on that and asked, like, didn't you know what you were doing was wrong, especially since you were using a fake name for him?
Yeah, and yourself when they were on
at
the
one
run.
point. And she kept saying, I didn't know what I was doing. She even told the police that in one of there was film footage of that on the day she was arrested. Yeah. And it's like, I can kind of believe that in the beginning you feel like you have to trust, based on her personality type. She felt like she was putting her faith in someone, but it went so far to the point that this guy was defrauding her entire family, going behind her back.
It's true. He had gotten a lot of money out of her
family,
mom,
and to the point that he was controlling her email, her instant messenger, her text messages, everything. He was the one emailing, posing as her to investors, and she got to the point where, and there's like footage, I have no idea how they even have this footage, of like her in a hotel when they were on the run, I guess, of her being like, I don't want to do anything. She's kind of crying and hysterical in the room. And she just says, I don't even access my phone. Like it's all him. It's all this guy controlling her phone and posing as her, which is something she points out later, like a sign of being in a cult. She kept kind of bringing up cult like behaviors and how she identifies with being a victim of a cult, in part because I think it offers her an explanation for what happened to her. But there is this careful balance that the Vanity Fair editor, who's also interviewed as a part of this documentary, kind of points out that, like, I don't think there's a clear line from what we're seeing in this case of her being like 100% a victim or like an active perpetrator, because you can be a victim. And I think at the beginning, there's very much a case for her being a victim. But the second you start victimizing others and knowingly executing it without going to authorities or an attempt to do something about this, and you are furthering this crime, and she's like defrauded her own family, employees, and investors for him. And I think a reasonable victim at a certain point would have realized, I need to do something. And now, like, I want to be careful, okay? Because I do appreciate and understand that there is such a thing as being absorbed into a cult and having a mentality
or just emotionally abused by
completely
a partner.
abused by a partner. Yeah. But her interview kind of suggested that she knew that this wasn't going anywhere, and she felt almost just like embarrassed to say anything about it. So she just kept going along and went on the run, essentially, with him as a result.
It's a very human thing to, if you are taken advantage of or you realize you did something really stupid, sometimes it's easier to continue going along with it rather than just acknowledging or admitting to yourself that you just did something really fucking stupid. And I think you can kind of hear that. There are a lot of taped conversations between the two of them that she started taping at some point, where like some of the things he had suggested to her, like he's a big fat guy, by the way. And that's important because apparently he's some like special agent, and it just doesn't make sense within their narrative that he would just be some schlubby loser, right? So I guess he had convinced her or given an explanation that he was just wearing a fat suit.
A meat suit.
A meat suit is, the term.
Ironic word because she's vegan.
But like there are calls towards the end of her being like, are you going to take off the meat suit to prove to me you aren't just a fat guy? And it's like, listen to what the fuck you're saying right now. Like who believes that? Like, I don't know. It was more like Tinder swindle. Like people can get scammed and I'm willing to look at them as victims. The kinds of things she was willing to believe were just so outlandish and bizarre. I have a lot of trouble having sympathy for her.
Yeah, I know, and I'm trying to understand. I did read her blog post, and I think the second you like read her blog post, you start to feel a bit differently because she's unhappy that they implied that she was still in contact with him, and that that's not at all the case, and that she understands that she hurt a lot of people along the way.
I mean, there were phone calls between them. So they both went to prison, by the way. We kind of glossed over that. Him for like a year plus probation, her just for a few months. She still is in millions of dollars of debt, I assume, too. But yeah, there's a call they had months after both of them got out of jail, and it's incredibly bizarre. And the Vanity Fair writer kind of alludes to this too. Like, it feels like part of her still believes in his fantasy, because she calls him up again, and it's like, you'd have to like show up in front of me and shapeshift for me to believe you now. And
they like laugh about it.
There's nothing to believe at this point. You just went to jail. Like, what happened.
Like, was she joking? That's what I don't know. Like, it's kind of a weird sense of humor. She maintains in her blog post, because she hates the outcome of the ending.
I didn't know
She
about
maintains
this.
that she has not had contact with him since that release from prison, and that they haven't spoken. So I guess that's a few years. She didn't like that the documentary ended basically suggesting they're still in communication and have been.
Yeah, it suggested there was a recorded phone call between them months after they had gotten out of prison. Yeah. She's saying they lied about that?
No, she's saying, I guess that was it. And she didn't like that the ending implied it's an ongoing communication, because that's kind of what you get. Like,
okay, but if a guy landed you in prison by stealing your money because he promised you he could make Menchie live forever, are you calling him up 2 years after?
I would believe him.
Are you calling him up 2 years after you get out of jail to joke about like, can you still make my cat live forever? Like, it's just so incredulous to me. Like, I don't get it.
It almost feels like she's not that mad at him.
Yeah.
Which is why I think it bothers people. Yeah. Because you'd think if she felt like a victim of all of this in the ways that she's kind of suggested, like she was a victim, like a cult, she was brainwashed, and she said those things, then once you are separated from your abuser, you don't, and like you found freedom and people are on your side and acknowledge that, like you don't want to talk to them again. And if you did, you'd be terrified, not
people weren't on her
happy
side.
to
Though.
talk to
She
them
was
again.
framed as the bad guy in the media.
Yeah, I
about
think
it.
that the media didn't like her for sure, but it seems like she's done more reading up on like
and I
cults.
guess that we should be a little sensitive, I guess. Like, it's hard to know how a victim should feel in a situation like this. And it might just go back to that not wanting to admit you were just so obviously conned. So you're just holding on to some sort of belief that there was some truth to what you were sold or what destroyed your life in a way.
And I know this is the frustrating part, that, someone who works in psychology and spousal abuse or emotional financial abuse studies would be able to unpack a lot better. But from what I understand, like being the victim of a crime where someone extorts you or defrauds you for money is never as simple as like clicking on a link. I mean, that also happens, but
Yeah.
it's often like emotional abuse and then comes the financial extortion abuse. That's why seniors are one of the most vulnerable populations for online financial fraud and extortion, because they are the most vulnerable to agree that you say my printer's broken and I have to give you my credit card to repair it, I'll do it. Because they don't know. It's a vulnerable population, and it's what online scammers take advantage of. And I think there's like another group of scammers who take advantage of vulnerable women, not because they don't know how to fix their fax machine, their like computer, but they are more emotionally vulnerable to relationships and power imbalances, where they maybe are looking for someone to help take control of their life, which is like a stereotype, obviously, and not every woman falls into that.
It's a product of a sick culture.
It
too,
is
right?
absolutely.
Yeah.
It's a problem. But you can kind of understand through watching this story, I think, that she fit somewhat easily into that slot. She was looking for someone to kind of...
She's the kind of woman who could lose all her money to an MLM, you know? Like, couldn't you see her also
But
in
she
that role?
also presented as an intelligent business person, which is why this story is so difficult for people to believe.
Yeah.
So that's why it's hard to believe. She like had her own restaurant, was very successful. Celebrities knew her. She was like running and managing a team. She majored in econ.
Yeah.
And then a
So
guy's
all it
like,
takes is
send me
some
10K,
loser.
I'll pay your debt later. But like also this, I mean, apart from her story, if someone is pretending to be rich and say, I'll take care of your debts, don't worry, but first send me 10K to prove that you
prove
love
your
me,
loyalty.
like red flag.
Red flag. All the
More than a red
all the
flag,
flags.
all the flags. That's like the basic structure of a scam.
So many of these scams, yeah.
And so many of those scams on a much simpler level without the emotional component exist all the time. That's how many of our grandparents got scammed, like, oh, we need your like banking information because we're going to give you this, but first we need your information. Or like those scams where it's like you've won $100,000, but first you need to give us 10K for the shipment or something.
Yeah, there's a pretty common one now
Yeah.
where it's like you think you're talking to someone at the bank and they say, we're trying to transfer you money, and like they make you make a mistake by sending them sending you too much, and
So
then
you
they
have to give it
ask you to
back.
give it back. Yeah,
Right.
when they really never sent you any money at all. There's fascinating YouTube channels of people who know what are going on, playing with these scammers to show people exactly what they try to do. And it's like almost always from Indian call centers for some reason.
For that type of
For
online scam,
bank fraud,
but,
yeah.
But this is like, from a psychological perspective, such a more interesting scam, because I think it's the word scam doesn't tell the whole story. It's not just a scam. Like this guy got to know her, became a huge part of her life, and she was a huge part of his life, to the point that he inserted himself in her business, started running her company for her, started telling her employees what's going to happen, how they're going to restructure. And they're all looking at him like, who is this guy?
Yeah, who is this
Like,
guy?
she never said that he had a role here. And now she's somewhere in Rome because he sent her there to keep her away while he manages her business and changes all her account stuff around.
Yeah.
Like, everyone knew this was fishy. And so did she. That's my struggle, where like I'm trying to give a little bit of credit and flexibility to understand and appreciate how one can land in that spot, especially if one is feeling like there is another world and that he might have been able to make good on those promises. As much as I'll never believe that, and that would not be something that, I would say, yeah, sure, okay, 10 grand then. But like, there are people who have different kind of aspirations and are more easily convinced of things if they're in a worse spot.
Yeah, so I guess this shows how it's very difficult to just give a simple answer to the question of whether she's a victim or a perpetrator in this case. I feel like I'm less sympathetic to her than you are, maybe, but I also didn't read this blog post of what she wrote after.
It wasn't that long. Like, it's not like it completely changes your mind or anything.
Okay.
But she said that they got most things right, but she didn't like how the ending implied that they were still in contact, as if like she was continuing to scam or something.
Okay. And I thought she was being pretty evasive throughout the interview. And it's not clear if she was being evasive because she like didn't want to admit she had been taken advantage of in such a ridiculous way, or if she was being evasive because she was a bit more of a participant in things than we realized. Also, can we talk about what he did with the money? He stole like over $1.5 million from her, by the way.
Over like just 2 years.
Yeah. And he just blew most of it on watches and mostly on gambling. He mostly just gambled it away.
And
like,
we don't, at least from the documentary, it makes it seem like she had no idea where that money was going that whole time until later.
Yeah, when he was off on his secret missions.
So when he would say like, I need
right?
10K right now, you need to trust me, she would just do it. And then next month he would say, now I need 45. And she, challenged him at some points being like, where's this going? I need it back. I have debts. What is this for? I have to make payroll. And he would just get mad at her for asking and ultimately never explained where that money was going.
She wasn't passing the test. He goes, if I
passing
told
the
you to
test.
burn all your money tomorrow, you would do it.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
But he was promising her, well, it's not exactly the same. He was promising her that she would get it all back and more as long as she continued to trust him. So she would give money thinking like, I'll get it back after no evidence, except a couple times he probably just so he could elongate this scam would give her a couple grand and make her feel like she like did a good job. So she'd written some diary entries saying like, he gave me back 2K. It feels really good. I needed that reassurance.
After she'd
given him like $200,000. But he would do that occasionally, which was just like a tactic in his book to keep her in line, to keep her trusting him. So maybe if she was ever on the brink of like questioning, and maybe she gave that indication by challenging him, he would do things like, here's 2K. Now you be a good girl. So it's these tactic things that like you see a little bit of a glimpse of in this documentary, but you really don't understand, which I agree with. I agree with that we can never understand, to be honest, what she actually went through on a day-to-day basis for years with someone treating her like that. And the types of things he said, he alienated her from her entire family and friends. He completely changed, took over her relationship with all of her coworkers, her company. He basically, for all intents and purposes, became her and acted as her in text messages and everything.
Yeah, no, it is awful. And like, there are a few moments of like humor in like her having self-awareness about it in the series. I thought like he made up that he had some brother, and it's like he was implying he was having some like global otherworldly type relationship or struggle for power with his brother in almost like a mystical way. And I think there's a point where she's going like, I realized he really liked the Marvel movie Thor. And like, I think he was just describing the relationship between Thor and Loki. And they're showing clips from the Marvel. Actually, you probably didn't understand that reference.
I kind of
Did you kind of
understand.
get it? Okay. Two magical
Yeah.
brothers are fighting in a superhero movie.
But I guess she was drawing that parallel because she realized that he didn't have a brother after all. He was just like
Well,
imagining
she
that he had
saw
a
the
brother.
parallel
Yeah.
between like what he was describing as a relationship with his brother to what she watched in a fucking superhero movie.
Yeah. I think she was just really allowing him to entertain her with these wild ideas of reality. That's
Yeah.
what it seems like. And it's really unfortunate. But to answer your question, is she a victim or a perpetrator? I think I agree with what the Vanity Fair editor, the one who like first detailed this piece in 2016's take was that I'm not sure. I think she was convicted for I forget the charge in the U.S., but like some fraud, defrauding investors, something like that. Her sentence only ended up being 5 months or something like that in jail, or she ended up serving 5 months in jail and then 5 years probation. So yes, she has a criminal record as a result of that. So she is guilty of that. She pled guilty. She took a plea deal.
Yeah. Good luck ever borrowing money
Right. So
again
she'll
or.
always have that attached to her name, which will prevent her from getting bank loans and so
Mhm.
on. But
Actually, sorry, we should add this too. Like,
yeah,
even towards the end, even while they were on the run from police at that point, fugitives, she was still reaching out to friends to borrow money from them. And people
and
were
they were still
still
giving it
giving
to
her
her.
money.
It's kind of incredible, yeah,
Could
to
you
observe
imagine?
how many friends and family members and investors who were maybe friends were willing to keep giving her money after they already knew of this guy and that he seemed like he appeared like a scammer to all of them. They all kind of saw through it, and that was clear in their
So
interviews
why are these people giving her? Like, I
because they
understand
feel
her
bad for her.
family being worried about her.
Yeah.
I don't like how many people do we have in our life that we could
Who
reach
we
out to
could,
be like,
yeah,
could I have $60,000?
and they're like, yeah, no problem.
I'll pay you
Three
right
times.
back.
Yeah, that's a good
Right?
question.
Like, I feel like maybe the context of her social circle was a little lacking. Does she just have a bunch of like millionaire friends and like hang out in like socialite circles where like people are just handing each other thousands of dollars for no reason?
I have no idea.
Right? It just
But
it did
it is weird because no one else can relate to that, to
right?
being able to borrow 10 here, 60K here from a friend when you just say, I'm in a tough spot, and repeatedly do that
Yeah.
from the same friends, or at least friends who knew of the friend who never got their money back last year. Like, that word would spread.
I wonder if that restaurant's still open under maybe the next time we're in New York, we should go. Do you think do
I
you
don't
think
think
it's still open? Maybe
it's.
they just sold it though and someone else is running it. What was it called? Pure well, there was
I
a
can't
funny name for
remember.
their juice bar.
Lucky Duck or
Lucky
something?
Duck?
The
Lucky
Lucky Duck?
something
The
Lucky
Lucky
Duck?
Duck? Yeah.
I'm interested.
Okay, Ben just wants to buy
I wanted to hear
a
more about the
plate.
food aspect. I think the restaurant industry is really interesting.
Yes, Ben.
If you could open any kind of restaurant, what would you open, Christine? Would it be
A
vegan?
garbage bowl restaurant.
Garbage bowl. So it's a salad
Could
bar.
I just finish my thought about the perpetrator versus victim?
Okay.
Because I was like almost done.
Okay, yeah, go on.
Okay, I find this really interesting because
Yeah,
the
yeah, yeah.
psychological component is super interesting to me. I think that I want to give her some credit in believing that she did actually go down this hole and she is a more agreeable person and that contributed to it. And a lot of people just like can't help that, which is the thing that people will criticize her for. Like, you're just so dumb. No one would do that. That's not true. Some people would because they trust people too much and they believe that things can be better. And while that seems like an optimistic and good personality trait for some people, it can also have unintended consequences like this. So I think looking at it as an educational piece rather than to hate on her for being dumb, because that's not really what I would simplify it down to being. However, if she believes herself to be a victim, I think she needs to take the steps to take accountability for what she ended up doing to victimize others. Because you can be both. I think you can have been a victim of his abusive, emotional, and financially abusive behavior, but also recognize that you victimized others, you defrauded your family, you didn't pay your staff, you lied to investors knowingly and did other things. And while she, yes, technically accepted a plea deal, so maybe that was it, She still to this day, even in her blog post, my interpretation of it is, and in the documentary, doesn't really want to accept full responsibility. Like she acknowledges that what's done is done, but she still tries to lean like almost like as a crutch on this, like, I was in a cult. I identify with cult people. Therefore, those people are never that responsible, right? And I think it has to be a little bit of both, especially if what you want to do with this is have it be a teaching tool. Through many interviews she's had since this came out, she's told publications that she wanted this story to be out. This is according to her. She wanted this story to be out so that others could learn from her mistakes. Mm-hmm. So if that's true, you can't just say we're like cult-like victims. You have to acknowledge the mistakes that you ultimately ended up making. And that's why you want to teach this lesson. So that's really kind of what I wanted to unpack.
Okay, no, that yeah, thank you. And like we've seen other documentaries about cults before that I think have done a better job or have shown victims of cults who are very willing to talk about the fact that as a victim of a cult, they also victimized other people into joining the cult.
Exactly.
The Nixium one was a really good example. That's about Keith Raniere. He basically convinced a bunch of women who wanted to be actresses to like worship him as some sort of intellectual, I don't know, leader. And he like started branding them and
then
controlling them.
His women would assist
but that's
in
right.
the branding
Those
of other women.
Would find other and recruit other women to be victimized by that guy. And it's like they are both victims, but also perpetrators of victimizing other women in that circle, right? And I think you're right. That's a really complicated territory to go down. And things aren't black and white. There aren't just victims and there aren't just good guys and bad guys in these stories.
You're both in that particular incident.
Okay.
Like you did perpetrate against other women, like in that example. And I think she did assist and perpetrated herself in a few of the crimes, which is ultimately like part of her guilty plea. But just the way she speaks now, maybe it's just my reading of it. It's kind of subjective. It's just like the feeling you get from listening to someone. I don't know. Maybe it's what the editors chose to put into the documentary too. There's always that. I just get the feeling that like it's not completely. There's not as much accountability.
But it's maybe how you have to rationalize the situation to yourself, right? More than tricking other people.
Well, she said something in the documentary that kind of like rubbed me the wrong way. She said, well, it was already $6 million worth of total debt. So what difference does it make if it's 6 or 60? It's just unimaginable. It's kind of a weird thing to say. Like, so because the number is high, like it doesn't really matter how much money I've taken from other people or my actions have contributed to.
Yeah, it's
like there was things like that I guess you have to watch for yourself and decide. It's statements like that make me go, what? One good question that I saw people had that I think is interesting, and I want to see what you think, is did Netflix pay her for her participation in this documentary?
I mean, do we know the answer to this question?
Well, I know an answer according to her, but what do you think?
I mean, I would hope not, but I wouldn't be surprised if she was.
So according to her, I'm not sure, maybe they've put it out since, but I don't know if Netflix has said anything. It was not in the documentary, this fact, but she says that Netflix did not pay her, but she negotiated a deal. Well, first of all, she said that Netflix normally doesn't pay, or sorry, not Netflix, but like producers working on documentaries, the standard practice is not to pay the subject.
Yes, for ethical reasons, mostly.
So she said that's already like standard practice, but she negotiated a deal where they would pay her an amount that would help her pay back some of the employees whose debts were still outstanding from like years ago. And that she only did that because she felt like it would have been a lost cause to do this, make nothing, and not be able to pay her employees back. So she claims that she did ultimately get paid, but it didn't go through her bank. It bypassed her through lawyers and went straight to someone who was executing like some form of a class action. I don't know if class action is the right word, but like there's a lawyer representing a lot of the employees who were suing. Okay. And that is currently still being distributed. They're just trying to track down employees. So she did
That's interesting.
get paid, but she says that she had to disclaim it on her income tax return for like disclosure
Even though,
reasons, but ultimately it went straight to the employees.
is this just
That's
based on what
says.
she's saying?
This is what she wrote in her
She
blog
sent it to the guy.
post. Well, the lawyer for the employees did
Oh,
acknowledge that amounts
okay.
had been received, and not all of them had been distributed yet, in part because they were having some trouble locating all the employees involved.
It's being like held
But
in
a
trust
lawyer
or something,
for
right?
some of the employees did confirm that they received money.
I guess that's good. Whenever
Yeah.
you see these Netflix series about people being victimized or ripped off or victims of fraud, and Netflix is making millions of dollars
You
off
wonder.
of streaming this, and the people who are the subject of the work aren't getting any of the benefit of that. Their victimization is just being broadcast to millions of people for enjoyment, right?
Yeah, but she's totally going to become an influencer now.
Do you think that's the next
Yeah,
step?
I totally.
I mean, she
think-
kind of was like early vegan influencer pre-social media. She totally would have been all over Instagram if she became big like 10 years later, right? Do you think that's the move? Like her and the
Yeah.
people from Love is Blind? They're just going to be selling Fib Fat
Imagine.
Fun sponsorships?
Well, maybe she's on a
Sorry,
show
did I
like
say
Love is
Fib
Blind.
Fat Fun?
She should
What's
be
it
on
called?
Love is Blind. Fab Fit Fun?
Fab Fit Fun, not Fit Fat Fun.
No, man.
Okay. She should be on Love is Blind, do you think?
Yeah, wouldn't that be funny?
Well, that'd be whoa, there's a reality show we're just scratching the surface of where you
Everyone
have
who's previously participated in conning people for
convicted
money.
felons on one side. There was a reality show about ex-cons at one point that a lot of people thought was really,
Distasteful.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, because it was like it was with the Shark Tank dude, Mr. Wonderful,
Kevin O'Leary.
Kevin O'Leary.
Yeah.
And it was like, here's some people who
Giving them
recently
jobs,
got out
I
of
think.
jail, and it's like, let me put you through a series of competitions to prove you can like work in society. It was really bizarre. I don't think it lasted very long.
Yeah, I don't think it's good. But I think it was probably a great thing for criminology students to write about and say how problematic it was.
Yeah. Like, yeah, your only worth is to enter the job market. That's the only way of proving you're reintegrated into
Also,
society,
like, it's
something
putting
like that.
your rehabilitation and reintegration on trial for the public view when, like, arguably you've already done your time and now you're just being tested and tried again, like, for people's entertainment. Like, there's a whole shitload wrong with that. Anyways, I do think
Love is Blind.
Sharma would be a great contestant on Love is Blind. Not that
Yeah.
this should actually happen, but I do wonder, and she kind of says in the show that she might want to open a restaurant, but she knows that no one's going to give her money. And I really don't like, I don't want people to just shit on her. I don't know what it is. I don't think we should just do that to anyone.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know, like give her a fair shot, but
You could give her some money to
don't
open
lend
a
her money.
restaurant.
No, don't lend her money. Don't lend anyone money.
Don't lend anyone
Well,
money,
no,
ever?
okay, I'm oversimplifying it. Yeah. I mean, if we're talking about us or, in our reality on this plane of existence,
Okay,
I
yeah.
can't see a scenario where someone I just met or recently met comes up to me and says, give me 10K, I'll give you double later. And I'm not telling you what it's for.
Yes.
It's hard, and I understand why it's hard to believe, and that's why the emotional play is the reason why this all happened, because it isn't just as simple as
I mean,
a
we've
monetary
been
promise.
asked to invest in things before, but that's different.
That's different, because when you make an investment, like say you're buying a house, you're buying a car, you're paying for tuition, there's a contract of form.
Sure, but
Of
you're
a-
also putting
yeah.
your trust, like if someone says invest in my startup, you're giving them money. You don't know if you're ever going to see that
Yeah,
money
but when you
again.
invest in someone's startup, there's also a piece of paper that says you've given this amount for this startup. She
Yes.
was literally just
She
giving
was just
money
giving the
to
guy
his
money.
personal account,
Yeah.
not knowing at all what it was being used for. Like there was nothing, not even like, I have a business, here it is, you're helping me, we're going to make money. Like not even that. So that's where my struggle is.
Can I give you a bit of a prediction? I feel like Netflix is really fixated on this women getting
Duped.
white women getting scammed by guys on
Yeah.
social media
Like
ish.
Tindler Swindler.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I feel like there's been a few of these series now.
Why are they so popular?
I don't know, but I think I know what the next wave is.
What is it?
I think it's going to be cryptocurrency scams all the way. I think there
yeah.
are going to be some fucking insane stories of people who lost inordinate amounts of money.
Do you think they'll focus in on the celebrities who participated? Because I think that would be really
I
interesting.
hope so. And I think it will be another situation of to what extent are these people victims, but who also victimized a lot of other people.
But they would only argue that they're victims in the sense that they said, person A told me I would make money. Turns out they lied, but ultimately I wanted more money.
So
but
I
I'm a
promoted
victim. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but would they be victims? Is that a victim?
I think they would. Well, I'm being funny when I'm saying that because, like, dude, you thought you would make money, like,
Well,
okay.
yeah.
Yeah, but they took advantage of
But
other
how
people
many
and their
people have we
fans
seen
thinking they would make more money. So I don't feel bad for you.
But we've seen so many like such obvious examples of internet celebrities doing this, where they promote a crypto coin, get their fans to buy into it, they cash out, make $1 million, and all their fans lose money.
There's a lawsuit on this. 'Cause
Yeah, I think Jake Paul is named in it.
So is Kim Kardashian though.
Yeah.
Because she posted an ad for crypto maybe like a year ago. It was a while back, and someone is suing her and the company
Well, you
for
gotta get off your ass and
misleading
work.
financial.
You got to get off your ass and defraud your
Okay,
fan
well,
base.
Yes, that's the secret.
Allegedly.
Allegedly. But yeah, there are cases, you're right, I'm just not that familiar with them, of like people suing or attempting to sue and hold accountable celebrities for promoting something like cryptocurrency.
And I think the defense is going to be ignorance from a lot of these people, which will just make them look like even bigger, more irresponsible people, right?
But they have less to lose, so what do they care? Which is the
Who has
problem.
less to lose?
Famous celebrities, they're already fucking rich.
Well, they have a lot to lose. They don't have less to lose. They have more money to lose.
Yeah, but
So what do you mean?
In the grand scheme of Kim's $100
I
billion
think they just
fucking
think
enterprise,
they're
this
not
is
going to
nothing.
actually be touched or implicated in this because it hasn't
Yeah.
really happened to anyone yet. But I swear there's going to be something's going to happen that's going to involve like maybe not just lawsuits but actual charges. And you're going to have some dopey fucking influencer celebrities thinking like, I was told this NFT was a totally legitimate thing. And they're just going to plead ignorance, right?
I mean, that would be the defense. Like, if you ask any lawyer, they would say, yeah, just, you didn't know. But it's like, this is a bigger conversation, but like influencers, anyone on the internet, promoting anyone to anything, have a responsibility to understand what they
they're
are promoting.
And I feel like that is so obviously not the case with a lot of people right now. And it makes
Yeah.
sense. It's a complicated thing.
But you know what's not complicated? The proposal that comes to their inbox that says we'll make you $1 million. So that makes it less complicated to some people. And I'm not saying that all influencers who promote crypto or NFTs, are 100% only for the money. I'm sure many of them argue that they love Web 3.0 and they want to advance technology and like that's something they're passionate about. And that could be true too. But I do think like a pretty significant hook, and we've kind of talked about this before, to getting influencers or celebrities to participate in Web 3.0 activities is the amount of money, the opportunity that they can make off of it, and that it's easy money, which is something that's always in the fucking subject title.
You'll
inbox.
see tweets about like, I'm doing this because like it's about female empowerment or something like that. Like this series of NFTs is good for female artists, but know that these people are getting
that's
emails
good
in their
marketing.
inbox that are saying, promote this NFT and we'll give you a stupid amount of money, or you'll have an incentive to promote the NFT because you have a better interest in it if other people buy it.
Yes, I feel like that's a whole other podcast, but I'm tired of seeing all of that everywhere I look on Twitter and everywhere. So I guess to conclude, is this story really about a bad vegan? Or is it
She ordered
just
a pizza.
about,
She ordered pizza.
or is it just about bad behaviors and bad relationships and bad actions that you take upon those who love you? Maybe that's what it's about. And I just hope that if anything, that this story isn't just used for, obviously it's entertainment. I know, I'm not stupid. It's a show on Netflix. People are going to be entertained by it. But if there's anything you can take away from it or like teach someone who this might be valuable to, who's, you think it's happening to them. There's someone out there right now who's listening to this, who knows someone or who's personally starting to experience the beginning of financial fraud through emotional manipulation. So that's why it's important. Not to get too serious on you, but
no, that's good. That's a great point.
all
I
right,
guess we'll see you next Taco Tuesday.
Next week is the 100th episode, Ben.
It is.
What are we gonna do?
We're gonna launch an NFT. SimplyPodLogical NFT.
Newfound tacos for Tuesday.
Newfound taco.
No, it's our 100th episode.
Non-fungible
So we do
tacos.
have something planned.
Do we? Why are you
Right,
saying? Why are you
Ben?
telling people that?
Because I just know people are going to be asking. We're probably going to be soliciting questions
Instead
from
of
you
an
guys.
am I the asshole, it's an are you the asshole.
Have we decided that yet?
Well, I don't know.
think so. But look out on our community page
Uh-huh.
on YouTube and maybe on our other socials. We'll see for a call out for input from you guys because we're going to make the 100th episode about you. You get to sit up here. No, I'm just kidding. But essentially.
We should open a restaurant. It could be like garbage bowls and ice cream. I'll do the ice cream, you'll do the garbage bowls.
And you're going to take all my money too?
Yeah.
And what are you going to tell me? Will Menchie live forever?
Menchie will live forever.
If Menchie lives forever, then,
How much would you pay for Menchie to live forever?
$2 million.
$2 million. Well, there was a celebrity who cloned their dog, I think, so that she could
Smart
keep.
choice.
Yeah, but I guess I'm not sure if it was a scam or not. She might have just given people a bunch of money, and they're like, "Yeah, we'll clone your dog."
Did the
And
dog...
just gave her a similar dog.
What? Wait, did she get another dog that looked like her OG dog?
Yeah, but a lot of dogs look the same.
No one looks like Menchie.
No one looks like Menchie.
No cat looks like Menchie.
I knew you didn't have to specify
I
that.
look like Menchie.
With those cat ears, yeah. Sometimes I see Cristine with cat ears and I'm confused. Like, Menchie, is that you?
Yeah.
Do you want a salmon treat?
All right, everyone. We'll end it there. Sorry for this mess.
Okay. See you next Taco Tuesday.
Thanks so much for watching. We'll see y'all later. Bye.